You know how long I've been waiting for this? Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself, yeah.
Hey everyone, Chris of Midlife Crisis Media here. Welcome to the final Blu-ray edition of my Film Collection 2024 live streams. Today I'm going to talk about everything in my fiscal standalone Blu-ray collection that begins with the letter U, or letters U through Z. I had more than I would like to talk about, but not enough to split into two different videos. So I'm just going to do it all today. And then next week, we will start in on the 4Ks in my collection, starting off with the box sets. Or maybe, well, TV in the box sets. How about that? So today, the last of my Blu-ray collection. Got some cool stuff in here to talk about. So let's get into it. First off is this right? Yeah, it is. Two of the few movies I like from this 80s and 90s action star. I want to say I like three total, and I got two of them in my hand right here. And that's Under Siege and Under Siege 2, starring Steven Seagal. So Seagal always kind of bugged me. He always came off as like an arrogant prick, and it turns out that's what he's like in real life. I saw most of his movies, the only one I saw in the theater, aside from these, is Marked for Death. That's the one where I think it takes place in Chicago, and it's Seagal versus a bunch of Jamaican drug lords. That one's kind of fun. That's the only other one I like. The rest I saw on home video, and I was always like, when it comes to like the fact that he's a fighter, what is he, a master in Aikido or something like that? It looked like slap fighting. It was always just kind of like, like when you watch the old Three Stooges and stuff like that, or like I'm trying to think of something else, like even the cartoons of the day, like the Looney Tunes and all that. When someone who was a boxer would go up to your face and go, brr, 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 that's what it looks like to me, is when he fights. And then it always ends up with somebody with a broken arm. And it's like, oh, look, he's doing the same thing again. So I never really got into him, and his attitude kind of bugged me. But I like the idea of this. I thought it looked pretty fun. It's Seagal, who actually cut his ponytail off to star in this one, is a cook. Turns out he was actually like a Navy SEAL before he became a cook for the Navy, serving aboard a aircraft carrier that has been taken over by people who want to use the weapons on board to get some money out of the government. And everyone thinks that the bad guys think that they have basically pushed everyone off into this area of the ship where they won't be a problem. Not Seagal. Seagal's got the upper hand, and he sneaks around taking everyone out one by one. The villains are Tommy Lee Jones, this is the movie that put Tommy Lee Jones back on the map. He was kind of a big deal in the early 80s. I think Coal Miner's Daughter was the one that got him a lot of attention, and then he kind of fizzled off, and this was the movie that brought him back into the limelight, because the guy who directed this is Andrew Davis, whose next movie ended up being The Fugitive remake with Harrison Ford, and Tommy Lee Jones played the government agent looking for him, and it really made his career take off after that. So Andrew Davis basically brought Tommy Lee Jones to us all again. Movie's a lot of fun. Characters are fun. Erica Eleniak plays a stripper who was hired for this celebration aboard the aircraft carrier and gets completely topless, and it's really nice. And it's just a really fast-paced action movie. Seagal's actually kind of likable in it. It's a lot of fun. And then we have the sequel, which I pretty much rushed out to see the day it was released theatrically. I saw this with the same friend I do believe I saw the first one with, and this one is not nearly as good. This one takes place on a train, and same thing happens. People take over the train who want to extort some money out of the government, and they are using this specific train because it travels through this area of the country called the Dark Territory, where no signals can get in or out, so that no one can track where they are. So Seagal and his niece, played by Katherine Heigl, who was another actor I do not like, end up having to not team up, but she knows a thing or two about self-defense. So it's mostly Seagal. Every once in a while his niece does some things, but it's pretty bad. The villain is Eric Bogosian, of all people, a stand-up comedian. I ended up having, I think, a radio show at some point. And what's that other dude's name? Eric Bogosian, Katherine Heigl, Morris Chestnut's in it too. Everett McGill, who was in People Under the Stairs. He was the was it daddy or father from People Under the Stairs, who was okay, but he's not as fun to watch as Tommy Lee Jones was in the first one. It's a decent action movie, but doesn't even come close to the first one. And there's a lot of really bad early CGI in this one. Here's one that you either love it or you hate it. I really liked it. I didn't get a chance to see this in the theater because it was released right as COVID began in 2020. And it was one of those movies that I was like, I'll go and see it later. There's other movies I want to see first, like, Bad Boys 3. And I wanted to go and see The Hunt and The Invisible Man. And then the theaters shut down. Couldn't get a chance to see it. So I ended up watching it when it came to Max, I do believe. Or back then, I think it was still HBO Max. And that's Underwater, starring Kristen Stewart. It's an underwater horror thriller. I wouldn't even really call it a horror movie. So the movie literally starts off with a bang. You see Kristen Stewart in this underwater research. I think it's a research facility, or I can't remember what they were. Diver. She's a mechanical engineer. It's a mining rig. Okay. Totally forgot what it was. It's an underwater mining rig that's pretty far down. She's the mechanical engineer. And she's brushing her teeth in the bathroom first thing in the morning. And that's right where the movie starts. Her brushing her teeth. And then all of a sudden just hell breaks loose. Things start exploding. And the halls start to flood. People that she has worked with for however many months, or she's watching them drown. And it's really gets you into it really quickly. And I really like that about it. It just thrusts you into it. And it does not stop. It's this constant thing of what has caused this accident? Are there any other survivors out there? And how do we get out of this problem? The thing is going to collapse completely, the facility. We need to get out of here before it does happen because it's going to go nuclear. And it has a lot of really cool twists and turns, I think. And it turns out it is something Lovecraftian related, which I thought was really kind of cool because I did not see that coming. And Kristen Stewart does not suck in this. I think she's a really decent actress when she's not in anything called Twilight, because I don't think anybody in that movie came out unscathed. I think everybody in those movies is terrible, even if they are good actors, like Robert Pattinson. Everybody hated him in that movie. He's great as Batman. So when I found this at Best Buy, and I think it was discounted already to $7, $8, $10, something like that, I was like, yeah, I'll pick it up. Still haven't unopened it, though, because like I said, I watched it on streaming. But it's a real fun movie. My brother, on the other hand, thinks it's one of the worst movies ever made and decided to make this long post about it on Letterboxd about how it is the start of the downfall of film. And I'm like, dude, it's a monster movie. Chill. It's not something you need to get yourself all worked up about. Here's a big franchise that I think has had a lot, like the Resident Evil films, has a lot of ups and downs. I like some. I dislike some. One of them I think is pretty freaking awesome. And we're talking the Underworld series. This is Kate Beckinsale and Scott Speedman, Vampires versus Werewolves movie. And I remember I went and saw this in the theater because the trailer that was released advertising I thought was fantastic. I loved the song choice that they picked, which was from a really bad movie called The Jackal. And Kate Beckinsale looked hot as hell wearing, skin tight vinyl and jumping off buildings and acting all vampy. I was like, yes. And the action was kind of cool. It was John Woo-ish with, people dual wielding guns and stuff like that. But on top of that, you also have vampires and werewolves running around. And I thought it was pretty rad. And also when I saw this in the theater, they showed that teaser trailer for Resident Evil Apocalypse, the Regenerate trailer, which was the fake product trailer, which ended up turning into a Resident Evil movie trailer that basically broke the internet in all of its 56K glory back then. And I went and saw this, I think, twice. I thought it was pretty fantastic. The action's really good. I like the characters. I like what it sets up for future movies because you could tell this was dying to become a franchise. And I like the idea of the hybridization of a werewolf and a vampire into one thing, which I thought was really rad. What it ends up looking like is kind of disappointing because it basically looks like a vampire with werewolf's claws who's painted black. Not too exciting. I would have liked to have seen some kind of weird creature, but they're like, no, we need to keep that person looking kind of human-esque so you can, sympathize with him and all that, but it's pretty rad. And it did set up a lot of really cool things. And that's when we got Underworld Evolution, the second movie. And this one's okay. It's directed by the same dude, Len Wiseman, who ended up marrying Kate Beckinsale. Like, she ended up breaking up with Michael Sheen, who she was dating at the time, who stars in the first movie with her. He plays the leader of the werewolves. And basically caused their breakup and ended up getting together with Kate Beckinsale, and now they're married. And he has put her in pretty much every movie that he's made since, except Die Hard, or Live Free and Die Hard. Or Live Free, what was it? Live Free and Die Hard, I guess is the name of that one. This one's okay. I like the continuation of the lore of the series in this one. In the first one, you find out that there are this trio of elder vampires who cycle how long they stay awake to oversee the clans that they oversee. Said that twice. And then, like, after 100 years, they get put back to sleep, and another one of them wakes up. Well, one of them gets killed at the end of the first movie, and then the next one wakes up, and that's who the villain is in this one, who actually happens to be a hybrid as well. And it is setting up some things. It kind of has a little bit of finality to it at the end, but you can tell there's still kind of places that they can still go if they really wanted to, which they did. It's basically the first movie, but just bigger and more in your face. It's okay. So then, for some reason, they made a third movie as a prequel, which basically did not need to be made because the information you got in the first movie about this story that this movie is showing you didn't need to be told, because it's a very short story that they kind of show you already in a flashback. And for some reason, instead of making a full-on sequel, they decided to go back and do a prequel like everybody else was doing at the time and still is. And they cast Michael Sheen again to play the same character from the first movie, but the love interest this time is Rona Mitra, who used to be she used to dress up as Lara Croft for Core, who made the original Tomb Raider game. Who made the original Tomb Raider games for the PlayStation 1. She was like the person who would always go to conventions dressed as Lara. They would pay her to do it. And she ended up becoming a movie star, like a B-level movie star for a little while in the 2000s. But this one's okay. It's a fun watch. But like I said, it really didn't need to be made. So they decided to go back and make that sequel that we actually expected the third one to be. And that ended up being Underworld Awakening. And this one I think is awesome. I went and saw this opening weekend. I think it was right after I got out of work that Friday. Went and saw it in IMAX 3D. And it was some of the best 3D I had ever seen. This was when 3D had made that big comeback in the early 2010s. And every movie had to use it. I don't know if they used the 3D system that James Cameron used, like Paul Anderson did with Resident Evil Afterlife. But it looks pretty goddamn good. The only thing is this movie is super short. I think it's like 75, 80 minutes. And the villain is not set up very well. But the villain is something that is pretty rad. So they bring back Kate Beckinsale again. She finds out she's got a daughter somehow. And they're connected psychically. And she has lost her husband, who's Scott Speedman's character. And the whole movie is about her search for him, trying to get along with her new kid and stop this new werewolf threat. Action is fantastic. Totally new director for this one. Ended up having a great visual style, especially when it came to the 3D. So because I liked that one so much, I was beyond excited that we were getting a fifth one. And that was Underworld Blood Wars, which I don't think it was playing in 3D here in the States, but I guess it played in 3D in Canada, because I was talking to Stuart Foley, Captain Foley from Trek Yards, another YouTube channel that focuses on Star Trek stuff, about it back when this came out. And he said he saw it in the theater in 3D, but it never played in 3D here. So I ended up getting a regular Blu-ray. Apparently there's a 3D one floating out there too. Not going to get it because I don't care, because I ended up absolutely hating this one. All the cool stuff that was set up in the fourth movie basically is gone here. They kind of got rid of the daughter thing. One of the side characters from the fourth movie ends up kind of taking the forefront because Kate Beckinsale's character is barely in this one. She kind of gets knocked out of commission not once but twice during the course of the film, and it starts to focus on all the side characters instead. I was like, was she just not available to do this, or was she not interested and said, I'll just do cameos in this one or something? Because it's really disappointing. Because it's like all of a sudden she shows up at the end and she's like, by the way, I've got superpowers now. I just did not understand what the deal was, but did not like this one at all. But the word is they are making a sixth and final film now. I guess Kate Beckinsale and her husband are looking to finish off the series. So we'll see if that actually happens or not. Will I go see it? Probably. Will I like it? I don't know. So you want to talk about a 3D movie experience. This was one of the best 3D film experiences I ever had, to the point where I ended up going and seeing it again in 3D and bringing other people with me, and they ended up loving it too. We're talking Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. This is by Luc Besson, the guy who directed The Fifth Element and La Femme Nikita and The Professional, Leon, and a couple of other movies in between. Lucy was his big movie that he made before this that got him the clout to be able to make this because that ended up being a big hit. It is, when I describe this movie to everybody, I say, if you like The Fifth Element, this is going to be right up your alley because this is the Fifth Element times 10. So this is the 100th element. Everything that was in that movie is just amped up beyond belief. It's based on a French comic book that I think is just called Valerian and Lorelei. I do believe is that character's name, if I remember correctly. I haven't watched this in like forever. And it's a space opera. It's also kind of a weird love story. But the thing that got me about this is, you want to talk about excellent world building, kind of like the way they did in The Fifth Element. This one goes above and beyond. It sets up this whole future world that is just like, I don't think I've seen anything like it. It is beyond cool. It cost them an arm and a leg, obviously, because 95% of the movie is CGI. But I absolutely loved it. The performances are fun. It's one of the only movies I can actually sit through with, what's her freaking name? God damn it. What's her name? I cannot remember her fucking name. Cara Delevingne, who's on the cover. She plays Lorelei. I usually can't stand her. I think she's a terrible actress. Here, it's like she got the joke. Like she understood the assignment because Dane, her name is right on the front. I could have just looked up there. Oh my God. I'm tired. Because Dane DeHaan is kind of like the opposite. He is beyond playing the straight man in this. He is like deadpan serious. He cracks jokes, but he just does it in a real deadpan way, and it's like not funny. But she seems to get it. She's like, I need to act over the top and crazy and kooky and all that kind of stuff. And she looks like she's having a blast. And he's just kind of like, I'm in this movie. But I do like their chemistry regardless. And it's just, everything about this is fantastic. In 3D, like everything was about immersion. And it was amazing. Like I said, and I ended up grabbing my brother when he came to visit from, I think, LA at that point. And my mother, who rarely ever goes to see movies in the theater unless one of us, like me or my brother, takes her to see one. And I was like, you guys are going to love this. And I took them to see it the next day, and they both loved it. It's planets. All its 1,000 planets. And in the end, I mean, the only other thing is Rihanna's in this, and I'm not a big fan of Rihanna. But in the end, it kind of is trying to say something about the way other countries view the U.S. as like these trigger-happy morons who are just willing to blow shit up because it fits into their agenda and not because it, is the wrong thing to do, kind of thing. So like I'm watching it, and it wasn't the first time I saw it. The first time I was just like, it was just eye candy. The whole time I was like, wow, they're pretty colors. Second time I saw it with my brother and my mother, I was like, oh wow, they're actually trying to like say something, I think, about the US just being, like I said, trigger happy idiots. So absolutely love it. I need to watch it again. I own 2 copies of this because this was never released in the US on video in 3D. I had to get this from overseas somewhere, and I think it's France. But it's a region-free 3D Blu-ray. And I also have it on 4K, just in case I don't want to watch it in 3D, but I want it to look the best it can because the movie is gorgeous. What's up, Peter, by the way? How's it going? Happy birthday, man! Next up is a horror movie that, so I've always said, and I still say, I'm making it sound like it's like made up. I always say that when I was a kid, my parents refused to let me and my brother watch horror movies. Doesn't mean we didn't try to sneak some in here and there when they weren't around. But like the first movie that like my parents knew I was watching was Hellraiser 2, the uncut version. So like I always tell everybody, like when I finally decided to say, the hell with you guys, I'm watching these things, you know, and you can't stop me, I went hardcore. But there were days where they would go bowling or they had like some dinner party with friends or something like that they went to, and they didn't hire a babysitter, or they did hire the babysitter and the babysitter just didn't give a shit. We would watch whatever was on cable that night or something that my parents had rented, either if it was for them to watch, not for us, or just for us to watch. Well, one night, I don't remember if it was a babysitter or not, but I do remember HBO was showing Vamp. This is a vampire movie starring Grace Jones and Chris Makepeace from Meatballs. Okay. So a bunch of college students, like rowdy, kind of annoying college students, if you ask me, decide to go into the city, kind of into like the south side of Chicago, if you will, to go to a famous strip club that they keep hearing about. And it turns out it's run by vampires. So From Dusk Till Dawn kind of stole this movie's MO. It's all right. The makeup is kind of weird. Like Grace Jones, like does not talk the whole movie. She's the lead stripper and the head vampire in the strip club, and she does not talk the entire movie. And all she does is like give like side eye, and it's kind of funny. Dee Dee Pfeiffer, Michelle Pfeiffer's younger sister, is in this, and she's kind of adorable. But all the main characters are kind of like these lug-headed, you know, frat boys that are kind of annoying and kind of want to see them go bye-bye. Jetty Watanabe, who played in 16 Candles, he played Long Duck Dong, is in this. This is the first time I saw him speak without the crazy accent, and he is really funny, but he's still kind of annoying in this. But it's a fun movie. I got this from Arrow Video. They released this, I want to say, back in the late 2010s, and it's region free, so I picked up a copy of it used because this is a fun movie that I remember watching as a kid. Now, we had a horror movie night for Halloween a few years back, and I had all these horror movies in my collection out for everybody to pick to choose. You know, they could choose one of these or multiple ones to watch that night, and they picked to watch Vamp. A lot of them hadn't seen it before, and I think it went over pretty well. Next up is another vampire movie, and that is Vampires, John Carpenter's Vampires. This was when John Carpenter was on his downswing in his career. In the this came out like in the, did this come out in the 2000s? I think it did, 1999. Let me see real quick. Doobie-doo. $1998. It does not seem like it came out in 98. I want to say Ghosts of Mars was the one that came out in the early 2000s. But anyway, I'm a huge John Carpenter fan. Ever since I was able to go to see movies on my own, I would go to see whatever John Carpenter movie was playing in the theater. And trust me, I did. And I remember we went to this big theater that's way out of the way from where I was living at the time. This took like a good half an hour to get there. It was in this huge, rich neighborhood. They had like, I want to say like 30-some screens in this theater. And I remember we waited in line to see this in one of their biggest auditoriums that night. And people were coming out of the theater from the screening before ours that we were waiting to get into. They kind of had this look on their face like, eh. So, like, as we're standing there, me and my friends are watching everyone walk out of the theater. We're like, oh, is it not good? Like, the reviews were kind of mixed, I remember. So we watched the movie, and yeah, it kind of lands with a whimper. It's obviously made with a very low budget. James Woods, who stars in it as the lead vampire hunter of this like group of vampire hunters, doesn't seem like the person that you would cast in this type of movie, which is why he wanted it when it was offered to him, because he never gets to play like the hero or like an action hero, and he wanted to really, really do it. And to play the lead vampire, you pick what's his name? Thomas Ian Griffith, who previous to this I saw as the main bad guy in The Karate Kid Part 3. Not a very good actor, and he does not play a very good vampire as well. Kind of like the dude who played Dracula in Blade Trinity. That dude's terrible as well. So not only is the villain not threatening, James Woods' character is written as this pompous, egotistical, like loudmouth, and all he does is make really bad dick jokes the entire movie. He's always criticizing another person's manhood or treating women like they're hookers all the time. Well, one of the women in the movie is a hooker who's being turned into a vampire. And that's Cheryl Lee, who played the girl who was murdered in Twin Peaks, which I thought was really cool to see her in something other than Twin Peaks for a change. And it's just this really kind of uneventful vampire movie that I said feels really, really cheap. And it's almost like you're watching a Western with vampires in it. But like, even the way they take the villain out at the end of the movie is really underwhelming. So not my favorite John Carpenter film. It's still kind of watchable because it does have its moments. But outside of that, it's kind of like, eh. And like he started this downswing after, I'm trying to think, what else did he make? I want to say after Village of the Damned, I guess his career started to like go slightly downhill, because the next one he did was Ghost of Mars, and nobody saw that. And then the movie he made after that went direct to video, which was The Ward, and it has Amber Heard in it, and we all know about her. Next up, we have two of my all-time favorite anime. And you know me, I'm not a huge anime fan, but back in the day, back in the early 90s when this stuff first started coming over to the US, I was all over it. And two of my favorites, well, the original one was the one that I saw back in the early 90s, and that is Vampire Hunter D. So this is based on a series of, I think, like 20 novels from Japan about this vampire hunter whose name is just D. D's nuts. Who is looking for kind of like Blade, looking for the vampire who turned him. He's a Dampier. He is half vampire, just like Blade. He's half vampire, half human. He can be out in the sunlight, but it weakens him a lot, to the point where he has to like get out into the shade quite a bit if he's walking around in the sunlight, which is why he has that gigantic freaking hat on that you always see. It's to block the sunlight, which I think is pretty cool, even though it looks ridiculous. So here he comes across this young girl who has been bitten by a vampire called Magnus Lee, who lives in this castle, and he's trying to save her and her little brother before she turns and kills her brother. And it's actually really, really cool. The animation is great. It has a great soundtrack. It's ultra violent. It's a lot of fun. It actually made me interested in reading the novels, which I did. I read about 3 of them, and then I gave up because I'm like, you know what? 20 of these things, and they all kind of start repeating themselves after a while. I'm like, eh. But the one that I think trumps the first one, and I thought the first one was one of the better animes that I had ever seen, we get the sequel, Vampire Hunter Bloodlust, which I ended up going to see in the theater not once but twice. It was playing downtown at the Music Box, where I now go for that 24-hour horror movie marathon every Halloween. And this one kicks all kinds of ass. It has a newer, more updated animation style. It's like that one feels like it was kind of made cheaply because the animation kind of stutters. This one is like smooth as silk. It is great, and it has like a lot of CGI enhancements. And it feels kind of episodic. So a young girl from a pretty wealthy family gets kidnapped by this vampire who is like, has kidnapped her, and he's like trying to take her across country. And the townsfolk and the father of the girl who's kidnapped hire D to get her back. Well, it turns out that not everything is as it seems. Like, he did not get all the information about what's really going on. And it's pretty cool when it happens. But the action scenes are fantastic and like really, really awesome. Like, I would love to see this stuff realized in live action. And then there's also this scene that takes place where D and the bad guy, the villain, end up going through this area where they deal with these characters known as the Barbaroi, who are like circus freaks, and each of them has like a special power of some kind. Like, one of them turns into a werewolf, but not only does he turn into a werewolf, a giant wolf's head comes out of his chest too, which is freaking crazy. And there's one dude who can control like, what is it? Like the webs. He's like kind of like a spider person, and he can He can trap you in like this dimension, this alternate dimension that his webs create. It's really weird. And then there's also this group of competing vampire killers that are pretty rad, and a few of them have some cool weaponry. One of them, Lila, is pretty rad. There's one that has like a special power who's like always on life support because he's always close to death because his power is slowly killing him, which I think is really cool. And then the whole ending is just one of the best action scenes I've ever seen. It is super cool. Highly recommend it. Just watch it to watch it. It is super fun. Got a lot of vampire stuff going on here. Next up is the Vampire Journals, which is from Full Moon Entertainment. Full Moon Features. I keep on talking about them pretty much in every stream. Charles Band's direct-to-video, low-budget horror, sci-fi, fantasy movies that were really popular in the early 90s, especially with me. This one is a spin-off to one of their big franchises, which was the Subspecies series of films. This one follows one character that they introduce in part 4 of Subspecies and shows them shows like how they interact with this other group of vampires. And it's almost like a soap opera, just starring a bunch of vampires, because they did not obviously have a big budget for this. It is super cheap. Isn't a lot of like gore and like action-y things going on like they do in the Subspecies films. This one is basically just a bunch of vampires having a bunch of like in-house fighting. Like, who's spying on who? Oh, it's like a reality show. It's weird, but it's still kind of cool. I liked how they have the original artwork, which was this book on the back, but the artwork on the front makes it look like a softcore porn movie with vampires. It's all right. I wanted to have it, not because I think it's one of my favorites, and it kind of came out later on down the line when I stopped watching Full Moon films because they started to go into softcore porn and just like icky, rapey stuff, which I don't like. But I ended up watching Subspecies 4 when that came out, I think in the late 90s, and then this came out not too long after. Next up, I basically bought it because it's connected to Subspecies. Anyway, I actually kickstarted this movie. I contributed money to get this movie made, and it was one of the fastest at the time Kickstarters for a film. Like, it broke its like the number that they were going for money wise in one day, and they were looking for like $1 million or $2 million bucks, and it broke that in one day. And I contributed money for it and ended up going to see it in the theater. Only played in the theater for I think 1 week, but I was going to get a free Blu-ray of the movie. I got a free copy of the script. I got a free poster. I got a free digital download of the film and a couple of other goodies for backing it. And that is the Veronica Mars movie. So my parents were obsessed with like what I used to call teeny bopper shows. I could give a shit about any of that kind of stuff in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. My parents would watch Dawson's Creek, Gilmore Girls, Veronica Mars, like all that kind of stuff. And I could give a crap. This was the only one that I actually sat down and watched. I remember like we were having dinner and we're going to, like Dad's like, oh, we're going to eat in the living room. We're going to watch the first episode of this Veronica Mars show. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And I sat down and I watched and I was like, this is actually pretty good. Like, I don't know if I'd watch every episode, but, you know, I enjoyed that quite a bit. So I would see episodes here and there. Ended up to grow to become a real big fan of it. And when the DVD sets of each season would come out, I would buy them and then watch the entire thing. And I was like, that's when I went, yes, this is pretty rad. It's about Veronica Mars here, who is kind of a lower income kid in a very high income high school and area in Florida. And everyone picks on her because not only is she kind of like, poor compared to everybody else, but everyone thinks that she had something to do with the murder of her best friend like a year earlier, who was played by Amanda Seyfried, who ended up kind of going to become a pretty big name. And the first season of the show is her trying to actually, like, regardless of the fact that she comes from like the poor side of town, her father runs a private detective agency and she is kind of his assistant. So she has resources available and she's actually kind of a better detective than he is at times. And she uses all these connections her father has to find out who the real murderer was over the course of the first season. And when you find out who it is kind of a complete surprise and it's kind of fucked up. So I really, really liked it. The second season is good as well. The third season is when she kind of goes off to college, and it kind of loses a little bit. There's like an on-campus person doing sexual assaults and stuff, and I don't know, it's not nearly as good as the previous 2 seasons, but it's still good. And then the whole 4th season was actually going to jump ahead a few years, and she's working for the FBI, and it was going to be like a police procedural with her natural gifts for as being a detective kind of thing happening. Like, everyone's going to be using the resources of the FBI, but she's going to still be kind of doing like the ground level work that she normally did. So when the movie came out after the third season, the show got canceled. The 4th season never happened. And there was all this talk that, we want to make like the makers of the show and all the cast and crew wanted to come back and make a movie of some sort just to wrap it up. When they finally jumped onto Kickstarter and, got it going, that was when I was like, yes, I want to see this thing wrapped up. And the movie did not disappoint. It has all the characters you liked, disliked from the show. It does wrap things up, but also set a couple of things in motion for a possible sequel or another show, just in case. But it was really fantastic. Some new characters were introduced. I really, really liked it. I was super happy that I helped to contribute to its budget. And then we ended up getting a sequel TV show that lasted for 1 season and wrapped up a lot of things that set up, and the other show, the 3 seasons, set up also with some characters, and also had one big bombshell happen at the end of the season, which you think is going to lead into another one, but didn't happen. Anyway, great movie. Next up is a Japanese movie that I rented from Blockbuster just because it was there. I didn't really know anything about it, but the trailer or the cover art looked kind of cool. It was a dude in a trench coat with his back to you, holding a samurai sword out to the side that's covered in blood. And I looked at the back of the box, and it had all this kind of cool action-y looking stuff on it. And I was like, cool, I like martial arts movies and stuff. I'll check this one out. And it was called Versus. Versus is, and get this, a martial arts, science fiction, horror, zombie comedy, I guess. It is like 13 genres all wrapped up into one. So there's this forest in Japan where it's kind of like the Highlander situation, where these people who are entangled with this forest find their way back here at a certain point in time. They feel like the urge to come back here, or they will just find themselves there. They don't even realize they're being drawn to it, but they just end up there to have a big conflict, a big fight. So there's these 2 people. One of them in this movie is the hero and one is the villain, and also this like woman who is like a fortune teller, sightseer, who ends up determining who is going to be the victor. And then when these 2 people fight and die, they will switch places in the their next lives and do it all over again. So we get to see the early 2000s version of this conflict happening. And it also involves zombies and stuff because the forest turns people into zombies and stuff. There's a bunch of other film references in this, but the action scenes in this are fantastic, to the point where I copied one for my Star Wars fan film series. There's like a flourish that a character does with 2 swords that I was like, I need to use that in my fan film because that is freaking badass. And it does look badass when we did it in the fan film as well. Crazy fight scenes that ended up becoming such a popular movie that after the movie was finished and released, the director and the 2 main stars went back to that forest and shot even more fight scene footage to add into the movie. The only problem is their hairstyles had completely changed, and some of them had lost weight. So all of a sudden, the villain is like a little bit skinnier, and his hair is shorter, and the hero is a little bit skinnier, and he has like almost like a completely different hairstyle that you can see they tried to style to look like the first movie, but it even is colored a little bit differently, so you can tell when it happens. But the stuff they added in is still pretty fun and funny. Some of the little additions they added are kind of funny. It's a fantastic movie. It has a lot of cool layers to it, and got me into the director, Ryuhei Kitamura, who I ended up watching every movie he made after that. He did this movie called Azumi, which is based on an anime, which I think is fantastic and has a lot of great visuals and action in it. He also did Godzilla Final Wars, which was the last Toho Godzilla movie for like a decade. And that's the one where they actually kill the American Godzilla from the 1998 movie. And like nothing, like the Japanese Godzilla basically just picks him up and throws him into the I can't remember the amphitheater that's in Australia, in Sydney or whatever. He just throws them into it and it blows up. And he ended up coming to the U.S. and he made Midnight Meat Train and a couple of other movies. What was it? No One Lives, I think, is the one that he made that I really didn't like. And recently directed a movie with Ruby Rose in it, so you know his career's on the downswing. But this is from Arrow Video, and it has a ton of extras. There are 2 versions of this. So it has the original version of the movie, which is just called Versus. That one that has all the extra footage mixed into it, the new footage, is called Ultimate Versus, and that's on here too. Highly recommend checking that out if you like martial arts stuff. And just stuff that's weird and offbeat, because it's really fun. Still have not watched this all the way through. I need to. And that is A Very Harold and Kumar Christmas in 3D. So this is the 3rd Harold and Kumar movie. I saw the first 2 in the theater. This one bombed horribly. I don't know if it had anything to do with the 3D or the time of year or what, or no one just gave a shit about these 2 characters anymore. Because I remember it playing in the theater one week, and then the next week it wasn't. I don't know what happened, but it disappeared super quick. So I ended up having to just rent it off of... I rented it from Blockbuster. No, I got it from Netflix when I was getting discs. And I remember falling asleep while watching it. And I was thinking at the time, like, this must have been something to watch in 3D, because you can tell of all the gags they're throwing at you that are in 3D that I'm not seeing because I'm watching it in 2D. So I was like, I'll hold my opinion until I can watch a 3D version of the movie. Well, I didn't get a 3D version of it until 2021, I guess, when I got into collecting all the 3D Blu-rays. And then the thing is, you want to talk about falling asleep while watching a movie in that VR headset for the PlayStation 4? That happened here too. It was Top Gun and this. So I still need to sit through it all the way. I don't know why I would fall asleep during it, because I love both of the other movies. And this one had the same kind of humor. Just, I don't know, just for some reason it put me to sleep. So I need to actually sit through it all the way. Next up, we have a concert film. That's not a film, it's just a concert. But that's Video Games Live Level 2. I went and saw the original Video Games Live series of concerts, which would have been Level 1. They weren't calling it that at the time. It was just Video Games Live. When it came to Chicago, and it was awesome. I went and saw it at the same time that Wizard World was happening in Chicago, which was the big comic book convention we have here in the city, which is now called Fan Expo, which is all about celebrity signatures and stuff. It is no longer about comic books, but they do have comic books there. Anyway, it was happening right across the street at the theater that they have, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. They played Mega Man's theme. They played some of the music from Tron. They played stuff from Metal Gear Solid, World of Warcraft, Medal of Honor Frontline, which almost brought me to tears. Only problem was when I saw it in the theater, I had read online and seen videos that people had taken of the kind of stage show that goes on as the music's being played. So I saw a video of when the Tron theme, or they were playing the big Tron montage in the during the concert, they brought a light cycle out on stage, and it would like go back and forth on stage and stuff. And during certain pieces of music, they would have something like related to that game come out. The only thing that they did when I saw it was the first piece of music they played was Metal Gear Solid 2, and it was the opening infiltration piece of music plus the theme that they play over the opening credits. And they had a soldier come out dressed like one of the soldiers from the beginning of Metal Gear Solid 1, and you could see he had something attached to his back and like a backpack, and it was the exclamation point when they get alerted. So he's walking around the stage kind of like looking like he's doing his patrol, and then like all of a sudden the music that they were playing would go duh, 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 and you would see the exclamation point light up, and he would get like real angsty and nervous and start looking around like he's going to shoot somebody. And nobody reacted to it the way that people reacted in the videos that I saw, because people went crazy for it when I guess the LA concert happened, but nobody reacted at all when I saw it. So I think they realized that they didn't need to do any of those things and didn't bother after that. So we only got like half the show, which really kind of pissed me off because I wanted to see a freaking light cycle in person, guys. But never really, as far as I remember, they never came back to Chicago with the other sequel concerts. So this one has themes from Mario, Zelda, Halo, Warcraft, StarCraft 2, Sonic the Hedgehog, Guitar Hero. So it's basically just a song that they licensed for the concert. Chrono Cross, Myst, Castlevania, God of War, Mega Man, Civilization 4, Advent Rising, because of course they had to, because Tommy Tallarico helped create these concerts, and of course he made the music for Advent Rising, and Mass Effect. And when I saw it, they did an Advent Rising piece of music, which was great. So yeah, pick this up at Half Price Books. It's pretty cool. The second disc is the DVD, which has a lot of extras on it. But yeah, it's not nearly. They do the special things on stage for this presentation of it that we did not get when I saw it, which kind of cheesed me off. I'm like, I wanted to get the whole experience, and they didn't give it to me. Next up is a Roger Moore Bond movie that I can't stand. It's the final Roger Moore Bond movie that he did before he retired from the character. Honestly, if you ask me, he should have retired 2 movies previous to this. Should have retired after from For Your Eyes Only. Don't get me wrong, I love For Your Eyes Only, but you can see he was starting to show his age, and the next 2 movies he definitely did, and that's A View to a Kill. So like I said, his last movie as Bond. Christopher Walken plays the villain in this, and Grace Jones is his henchwoman. And the 2 of them make this movie worth watching. Everything else is poop, if you ask me. The Bond girl is Tanya Roberts, and she has absolutely zero chemistry with Roger Moore. From what I understand, they did not get along at all, and neither did Grace Jones and Roger Moore. But it has a great soundtrack. I love the theme song from this one. But like Roger Moore's stunt doubles are in this movie more than Roger Moore is. That's how old he is when he's playing Bond at this point. Like it's really obvious too. They're not even attempting to hide it. So it kind of takes you out of the movie. Plus the story's kind of stupid. And like I said, there's no chemistry between Bond and like the love interest. And she's Tanya Roberts is like kind of like Denise Richards in World Is Not Enough, where she's supposed to be like this geologist, and you look at her and you're like, you know absolutely nothing. You know what a rock is, and that's about it. Same with like Denise Richards in World Is Not Enough, where she's playing a nuclear physicist, and it's like, girl, you know what a nuclear bomb is. You don't know how to make one. It's like, could not convince me otherwise. So yeah, it's bad casting, and it's just really, it feels really tired. Like it needed something to change at this point, and luckily they did when they hired Timothy Dalton, because he made, I think, a more interesting Bond than Roger Moore ever did. Deadpool and Wolverine just came out recently, so here's a Ryan Reynolds movie for your ass. It's Waiting. I want to say he made this right after he did Van Wilder, and this is the uncut version, which basically has like a minute of extra sex jokes in it. Yeah, it's all about working at a restaurant that's similar to Applebee's. I think mostly they were making fun of was that Irish pub series or like franchise of restaurants. What was the name of it? I always used to get a Monte Cristo there. It's been so long since I've been to one that I do not remember the name, but it was like an Irish pub franchise. But it's kind of like that, and pokes fun at that. Pokes fun at the way that or kind of thinks they're giving you like an inside look at the way people really are at restaurants that work at restaurants, the way the cooks are and the servers are and all that kind of stuff. I'm pretty sure it's not like that. A lot of dick jokes, and it's kind of gross at times. It really makes you not want to piss off your servers because of the lengths that these characters go to get revenge on people that treat them like shit. But it's really, really funny. It's Ryan Reynolds, Anna Faris before she had her lips plumped. I always liked her looking better like this before she had the surgery. Justin Long is like the new guy that Ryan Reynolds is training for the whole movie. Caitlin Doubleday, Andy Milonakis. Dane Cook plays like one of the head chefs. Chi McBride and Luis Guzman plays like the old guy that works in the kitchen. But it's a really fun movie. Went and saw it in the theater. Had a blast watching it. I always said it was like Clerks, but with a restaurant. Saw this with my ex on Valentine's Day, and that is Warm Bodies. It's based on a book about like zombies. Like the zombie apocalypse has happened. Zombies are now the majority of people on Earth. But the thing is, they may be dead on the outside, but their brains still kind of work, but they just aren't able to communicate the way that we do. So the lead zombie in this one that the movie follows around is played by, what's his name from X-Men? Nicholas Hoult. and you hear he has an inner monologue, and he looks at things and has thoughts about him, and has stuff that remembers stuff about his past. Whenever he eats a brain, he gets flashes of that person's life, and it kind of like makes him want to experience more life, even though he's dead. And he ends up falling in love with a living person, and it turns into Romeo and Juliet with a zombie. And it's actually really well done, really well made. It's actually really funny. And then like the end thing that I won't ruin if you haven't seen it is cheesy as hell, but it works. Like thinking about it right now kind of makes me cringe, but it also makes me smile. It's weird. It's dumb, but it's cool. But I think it's a pretty fun movie. This one, you either love it or you hate it. I think it's okay. I do realize as I was watching, I was like, wow, they cut out a ton of this movie to make it fit within a certain runtime. And this is also a super expensive movie to make. From what I understand, this movie made a ton of money in Korea. But in the US and elsewhere, it kind of didn't. But it did, like Korea and like Asia alone made this movie a hit. Everywhere else, not so much. To the point where they're actually talking about making a sequel, but they're like, if it's not going to make money anywhere else but in Asia, what's the point? And that is the Warcraft movie, based on, like, not the World of Warcraft. It's based on Warcraft, the original, RTS game, the strategy game. But it does have World of Warcraft type things in it also, like character types and all that. And you can tell from the moment this movie starts that it was hacked to pieces in the editing room, because you can tell there's supposed to be a really cool introduction for our lead hero. It's not there anymore because it just basically picks up with him talking to a dwarf out of nowhere. And okay, sure, you can tell there was something leading up to it, but it just didn't happen. They ended up cutting all the character development out of the movie and just had it be all the action scenes and stuff. Don't get me wrong, all that stuff is pretty cool, and the effects and the callbacks to the games and all that is really awesome, but it really is lacking a lot of character development, but did a whole lot to progress motion capture technology for films. Because the orcs in this movie are all motion capture, and it's usually people who are not bulky. They're lanky as all hell. And they just were made bulky in CGI, and it works. It works really well. The CGI, like the effects in this movie are pretty freaking awesome. It has a banger of a soundtrack too from Ramin Djawadi. But like I said, even the director, I remember I read stuff where he was like, dude, you have no idea how much of that movie, we had to cut like an hour out of that movie. It was supposed to be like this epic thing, but they cut it down for, not pacing purposes, but more screenings during the day means more money kind of thing that you used to hear all about in the 80s. But I got a kick out of it, even though I'm not familiar with the Warcraft games at all. I played World of Warcraft for like 3 months. I hit level 30, and I basically said, that's my end game, and I quit the game. And I have never played a Warcraft strategy game at all. So it was all new to me. So if they screwed something up, it didn't bother me. I was just going by what I was seeing on the screen, and I enjoyed what I saw. I didn't think it was awesome or anything. I thought it was fun. And then when I found this 3D Blu-ray at Half Price Books, I picked it up and watched it that night. And I ended up putting this on my list of one of the top 10 3D Blu-rays to watch in the PSVR, because the 3D on this is fantastic. I did not see it in 3D in the theater because the friends that I saw it with can't do 3D. It kind of like messes with their eyes, so it gives them headaches. So I watched it at home in 3D for the first time, and I was like, holy shit, that's fantastic. Kind of wish I did see it in theater in 3D. Next up is one of the movies I got the Disney Movie Club membership for when they're doing the whole, you can get, like, initially you get 4 movies for a quarter each. But then you have to pay full price for like 10 movies after that in order to fulfill your contract. And one of them was Watcher in the Woods. This was I want to say the first movie that Disney did in the whole dark Disney years that I talk about a lot. And the reason I wanted to get this on Blu-ray so bad was I'd been sitting on a DVD of this that I refused to get rid of until an HD option came out. So I wanted to get rid of that so bad, because I do not like watching DVDs on these high-def TVs. They look like shit. So when I saw that this was available only through the Disney Movie Club, I was like, yep, I'm doing it. I was The Black Hole, Something Wicked This Way Comes, Three Musketeers, Flight of the Navigator, that kind of stuff. So like I said, this was, I think, the first of the dark Disney years. So this is when they were trying to do something a little bit different by basically making a horror movie for kids. So it was still, I do believe, rated G back then, but I think it got reclassified and is PG now. Yeah, now it's PG. Back then it was rated G. I don't know why. So it's about I want to say in the 50s, Betty Davis's character, who's on the cover here, her daughter went missing in the 50s. And then you flash forward to like the late 70s, and the big mansion that Betty Davis, lived in the 50s, she's letting other families live there. So she's like basically renting the house out, and she lives in a little cottage on the property off to the side. And this family that moves in has an older daughter who kind of resembles Betty Davis's missing daughter. And she tells her all about it, that her daughter went missing, and, she went off with her friends one night and she never came back. Nobody knew what happened. They thought that she was dead. And so the young girl that has moved into the house starts to like see ghosts and like weird things going around the house, like mirrors break and make these triangle shapes. And she sees something in the woods that feels like that's watching her. Her sister has like these little fugue state moments every once in a while where she like acts like somebody else. So she starts to investigate what might have really happened that night back in the 50s, and it's some messed up stuff. And the original ending of the movie, which there are 3 different versions of the ending on this disc that were on my DVD as well, that they had to reshoot this movie's ending 3 different times because, number one, they thought it was too scary. The second time, they sped everything up and they made it look silly. So they went back a third time and shot an ending that was supposed to be closer to what the book was like, which I read, and the book is terrible. And then the fourth ending that they shot is what's in the movie now, and they had to reshoot other scenes to make that ending work. And it does work. It's cool and all. But the thing is, they did not have an actress available to them anymore, so all of a sudden one character changes into another actress for the end of the movie, which is really weird. But it's fun, but I love the alternate endings. I think they're all pretty cool. They just couldn't realize them with the technology that was available to them in the late 70s. So it's kind of sad that they did make a remake of this for the Hallmark Channel, and Melissa Joan Hart, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, directed it because I guess this was one of her favorite books when she was a kid and one of her favorite movies. And I saw 10 minutes of that and I turned it off because it is one of the worst things I've ever seen. So did not see this in the theater because my parents realized it was going to be a horror movie, and rented it on VHS instead. And we watched it the night that they rented it 3 times in a row because it's kind of like an early Shyamalan movie where there's clues as to what's going on the whole movie. You just don't realize that they're clues because they're out of context. And when you go back and watch it again, you're like, oh. So we watched it. It was me, my mother, and my dad. And we watched it, and I was like, that wasn't scary. It had some scary stuff in it, but it didn't scare me. But I really liked it. Could we watch it again? And it was mostly because I just wanted to watch it again. My parents were like, yeah, I guess. So they rewound it, put it on again. We watched it the second time. And the second time we watched it, my dad, I guess, had not been paying attention the first time. He was playing his computer off on the side in the basement. And the second time we watched it, he paid attention. And he's just like, I need to watch that again because like some things aren't adding up. And then I'm like, I don't have a problem watching it again. My mom was like, I don't have a problem watching it again either. So we watched it 3 times in a row. And the third time we watched it, my dad's like, oh, all those clues have been there the whole time. We just didn't know that they were clues. That's kind of awesome. So I think it's an early Shyamalan style mystery movie, which I really like. I think it's really well made. Next up, we have We're the Millers. It has a lenticular cover. I saw this in the theater. I think it was after my dad died when we were in Ohio. For the funeral. And like my brother and I needed cheering up. So did some of my other relatives. So we're like, let's go see a movie. There's something funny playing. And that was this. So we went and saw it at this theater down the street from where we were staying. And like we were crying. We were laughing so hard. I saw the trailers for this and I kind of went, like whatever. It looks like every other comedy out there, R-rated comedy, just trying to throw as many swear words in as you possibly can to get a laugh. And when you actually watch the movie, it is super freaking funny, especially Will Poulter. His character is like totally clueless. And the stuff that happens to him is super funny, except the whole testicle thing with the spider. I was like, you guys really just had to throw a dick thing in there for whatever reason. But the whole dynamic between the whole cast is really, really fun. And especially when that guy that Emma Roberts character is interested in that works at the fair, who has like no regrets tattooed across his chest, that dude was hysterical. Really underrated comedy. Nobody talks about it anymore, but I think it's still funny as hell. Saw this in the theater. It only played for like 1 or 2 showings, I want to say, during this one weekend because it was a Fathom event type of situation. And it's a documentary about one of my favorite things of all time, and that is Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This is what we left behind looking back at Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This is a whole documentary about the show and covers how the show was not respected when it first was released and how it's considered like the black sheep of Star Trek, that it wasn't considered true Star Trek because of the way the format of the show worked, that it was too dark and brooding and the characters weren't likable. And you also hear people saying, well, yeah, it was also very ahead of its time because not a lot of people were doing serialized storytelling in TV shows. All these TV shows, especially Star Trek The Next Generation before it, it was all individual episodes that had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then the next characters moved on to the next adventure for the next episode. Well, this one, pretty early on, decided to tell one long story arc that lasted for pretty much the entire run of the show. I want to say from the end of season 2 to the end of the final season 7. It was this long storyline about the Dominion. And they were setting things up during the first 2 seasons, and they really let it rip when this 3rd season started. It has interviews with all of the cast members, some of the minor cast members as well, the makers of the show. There's a couple of scenes where the maker of the show, Ira Steven Behr, kind of, what's the term? God damn it, it's on the tip of my tongue, too. It's when you erase something from happening, not redacted. God damn it, I cannot think of it. He kind of backtracks on certain things that happen in the show, because there's an episode in the show where Dax, who is this character who has like multiple identities living inside of her body because she is a host to a symbiont who has been passed down from like 7 or 8 different hosts at that point in time. So, and all their personalities kind of live through her. So it's her personality of the host plus all these other ones. And she's been men and women over the course of all these different lifetimes. And she meets the host for a lover that a previous host had. It's hard to explain. A previous host had an affair with another Trill like her. And the 2 symbionts meet back up at one point in time. And it's forbidden for symbionts to rekindle a relationship from a past life. But they do. And it turns out that, Jadzia, who's holding the symbiont, is a female. And the symbiont that she was in love with as another life is in another female. So it was like this like gay allegory kind of thing, And it didn't really come off that way. It was just a love story in the show when I watched it. I didn't really think of it as like a straight or gay thing. I was just like, oh, the host is in a different body. It just happens to be a female. Big whoop. But like in the documentary, Ira Steven Behr kind of like backtracks. He's like, no, we intentionally were trying to tell a story about that kind of thing. Like, no, you weren't. He's like, we were ahead of the curve. Like, no, you weren't. So they also do a really rad thing in this by creating the first episode of a theoretical 8th season of the show, and where they think that if they were to make an 8th season now, how they would do it and what they would do with the characters. And it's really awesome to see all the writers come back together and like piece together stuff to put a first episode to season 8 together. And I think it's awesome because I would definitely love to have seen that. It's one of my favorite science fiction shows of all time. It's definitely my favorite Star Trek show. So I definitely was interested in seeing this, and I think it was great. It was also a Kickstarter type of situation. They were going to be able to interview everybody without having to pay for it. They needed to rent equipment, all that kind of stuff. And they also wanted to upscale footage from Deep Space Nine in 4K or HD, the way that the Next Generation was for the Blu-ray market. But there were no plans for Deep Space Nine to be upgraded to HD at all. So they had to get the money somehow in order to get some footage upgraded that they can use in this. And from what I understand, they got way more than they needed. So they got a few extra scenes done that they didn't think they would, which I think is great. Because when you see it in HD, it looks fantastic. Next up is Whip It. Whip it good. So this is the roller derby movie with now Elliot Page. Drew Barrymore is in this. She also directed it. It was her directorial debut, and it's a lot of fun. I actually kind of got into roller derby from watching this movie. A friend of mine had, I guess, been wanting to get into roller derby for years, but didn't know how to go about it. And it turns out that Rockford, Illinois, has roller derby like leagues and stuff. So she ended up getting involved that way. So I ended up renting this through Netflix so I could learn the rules, so I could go and see one of their games or one of the games that she was going to be in, so I would understand what the hell was going on. And I actually kind of got into roller derby because of it. It's super fun. The movie's really fun and funny. It has a couple of melodramatic things going on because you got to have like the whole conflict thing between the mother and the daughter. And, oh, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. You lied to me kind of bullshit. Typical cliche stuff for this type of comedy. But ends up being really, really cool. And guess what? I went and saw that roller derby bout in Rockford, and I was the one telling everybody, "Oh no, that's some bullshit. That was I can't remember what the term is for when you bump somebody too hard and all that." I was like, no. And I was calling like all the plays and shit, and everyone's looking at me like, "Where did you learn all this shit?" I was like, "I watched a movie today. I'm cool." Next up, we have Willow. This one needs to get upgraded to 4K immediately. It's a shame what happened to the TV show on Disney Plus. So this is George Lucas teaming up with Ron Howard to make a fantasy movie, and you can tell they were trying to get a Star Wars style franchise out of it also, because they set a bunch of things up, and it just bombed horribly. I don't know what it was. I don't know if fantasy was on the way out at the time, but this came out like in 88, and even my parents, who love fantasy things, especially my mother, and my dad was like huge into RPGs, Ultima and all that kind of stuff, like had no interest in seeing this at all. We ended up having to talk my parents into seeing it at the Dollar Theater, which was like really way out of the way. It's not the one that we used to go to all the time. It was this other one. I think that's where we saw The Abyss. And my brother and I really liked it. I think my mother liked it. My dad, I think, was kind of like, eh. But it has a great cast. It's Val Kilmer, Joanne Whalley, who ended up marrying Val Kilmer after this. Warwick Davis, who was kind of popular for being Wicket in the Ewok movies, or in the Return of the Jedi and the Ewok TV movies. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of cool world building and a lot of early CGI. This is the first time I think I ever saw morphing in a movie, and then they ended up making it better in The Abyss after this. It's a really fun movie. Ron Howard, I know one of the reasons my dad didn't want to see this was he was like, Ron Howard, I don't think can direct a big budget, special effect, spectacle style movie. I'm like, well, who knows? You never know till you see it. Never know till you try. And ended up loving it. And it's become like this huge like cult thing to the point where Disney decided to make a sequel TV series to this, which I don't think lived up to the movie because of some creative choices that they made, which I think were kind of stupid. And then they set up a big cliffhanger for the next season, and then they not only canceled the show, but completely took it off the service too in order to get a tax break. Screw you, Disney. I think it's a fun movie. And here is one of the horror movies that I watched before I was allowed to watch horror movies. So this is one of the ones that I snuck watching on cable because I thought it sounded really cool, and that is Witchboard. It's about an evil Ouija board. So this new couple moves into an apartment. They have a big party, like a housewarming party kind of situation. And a friend of the two people that moved in brings a Ouija board to the party. And they contact this little boy who supposedly died in the apartment that they live in when he was a kid. And the dude who owns the Ouija board, who is actually like an occultist, tells them like, hey, we're doing this as a group. Multiple people need to be using a Ouija board at the same time to do it properly. You shouldn't use it alone because bad things could start to happen. Well, the, Tawny Katane, who is the female in the couple that moved into the apartment, doesn't listen to him and starts trying to contact the little boy on her own, and ends up contacting an evil spirit who's pretending to be this little boy and tries to possess her. And bad things start to happen. A lot of deaths. And it's actually really fun. It's well made. You can tell it's really low budget, but they kind of work around that in really fun ways. I like the cast quite a bit. It has a really cool ending. And there is one like continuity problem that I've always noticed when I watch this. So there's this one point where the villain kills everybody with an axe when he gets angry. When the spirit gets angry, he kills people with an axe. So there's this one part where somebody gets it, and you see it in close-up. It's like extreme close-up. The axe goes right here, like right between the eyes and the forehead. But then when the person is discovered, the wound is here between their eye and their nose. And I'm like, that's not what we saw. That's not what we were shown. Was this a reshoot? Probably. Kind of every time I see it, I go like, why would they redo that when you see it? Why wouldn't they change the part where it hits the body? I don't get it. I don't know why they did that. Makes no sense. But the movie's fun, and it kind of started a franchise off unintentionally because I don't think they thought it was going to be as popular as it became. I think it became a huge hit on VHS. So I remember when the sequel hit theaters, I was trying to get my parents to take me to see it, and they were like, we are not going to see a Witchboard movie in the theater. Like, you're out of your damn mind. I ended up having to see it on video, and I was like, well, it kind of sucks, so I'm glad I didn't. So the guy who made Witchboard, Kevin S. Tenney, also, I don't know if it's a weird situation. I want to say he managed to finagle some money out of some people to make another movie after Witchboard. And it ended up becoming this thing called Witch Trap. It has nothing to do with Witchboard, but it stars the same villain. The person who plays the villain in this plays the villain in this. And it's very confusing. Why would you put the villain who his face is on the cover art of this movie, and in the original cover art of this, it was just a huge face of that guy. Why would you put that guy's face on the artwork and confuse everybody? Because the movie starts with a disclaimer that says this movie is not connected to Witchboard in any way, shape, or form. It's a completely original thing. It's really dumb. But this movie is pretty terrible. Like I said, it was made on like a shoestring budget with really bad actors, really bad special effects, and dialogue is some of the worst dialogue I've ever heard in a movie. So a bunch of psychics of different types and a videographer are asked to go to this house, which is supposedly haunted by like this evil spirit who ends up being like the same actor, like I said, who played the villain in the original movie. And each of them starts getting off in different ways. And Linnea Quigley, the scream queen who is known for exposing herself in pretty much every movie she was ever in, plays the videographer, and she gets killed. And I remember reading about it in Fangoria magazine. They're like, oh, it's one of the nastiest things you'll ever see in your life. She gets killed by a shower head through the throat. And I don't know about you, but I think shower head, and I think about the big-ass shower head that we had at our house, which was like this big around, and you could turn it, and it would give you a back massage and stuff. So I'm like, how is that big-ass thing going to go through her throat? And then I watched the movie, and it's a shower head that's like that big around. And it's basically like the pipe that is holding it in place kind of leaps out and just kind of pushes it into her throat and then goes back into the wall, and she goes, and dies. Yay. Like I said, some of the worst acting I've ever seen. Whenever the villain is going to kill somebody, one of the psychics has like conniption fits, like seizures, and it's basically just her just going like on a bed and just like thrashing around, and it's really, really embarrassing. And then the lead police character, the lead cop character, is given no dialogue outside of really bad, unfunny jokes. Like he takes nothing seriously. Everything that comes out of his mouth is sarcasm. And it's really annoying. But it's still kind of a fun horror movie. And we watched this when Church and Cardboard Zero came to visit in February for the Near concert. We watched it. I recommended we watch it because they were like, we want to watch something that's like bad. And I'm like, well, I got the movie for you. And we watched it. They're like, yeah, that was pretty bad, but it was still kind of fun. They're coming back next weekend, and we're going to have to watch some more shit. It's going to be great. Speaking of shit, we got The Wizard, the Mario Brothers 3 commercial in movie form. So this is, what's his freaking name? Fred Savage, cross-country movie, because his little brother wants to play some video games. They're trying to get away from their parents. So Fred Savage has an autistic younger brother, and like their mother had died years earlier. They have an older brother played by Christian Slater also. And they want to go, like the younger autistic brother wants to go to California for some reason. And when they get there, it turns out the kid's like a computer or video game wizard. You kind of see it happening in the movie. They stop at a couple places and he gets an incredible score on Double Dragon and all that, and then gets beat by some guy in Rad Racer by using the Power Glove, which is the funniest freaking thing I ever saw in my life. And ends up going to like this Nintendo Championship situation in California where Tobey Maguire is working or is hanging out and plays Mario Brothers 3 for the first time ever. And basically that's what this movie is, a commercial for Super Mario Brothers 3. That's the only reason anybody I knew wanted to see this movie. They didn't give a shit about Fred Savage. They wanted to see Super Mario Brothers 3 in action before the game came out. And we went and saw it for that same reason. And it's not a great movie. It's a road trip movie with a bunch of kids. And it's not great. We watched this for my podcast. The movie is starting, I think, in the second season. And like it does not hold up. It's not nearly as fun as I remember it being as a kid. Yeah, even waiting for the Super Mario Brothers 3, even as a kid, I was just kind of like, they showed us like, what, 45 seconds of the game? That was worth sitting through this. Next up, I have a weird set that is a 3D Blu-ray and Blu-ray and DVD combo, but it comes in like kind of a thicker packaging. God, I keep burping. That is the Wolverine. Deadpool and Wolverine playing in a theater near you. This is the second Wolverine solo film. There was X-Men Origins Wolverine, then the Wolverine, and then Logan. This one is definitely better than X-Men Origins by a wide margin, but not nearly as good as Logan. Same director, though. Same guy directed Logan, directed this. It's okay. I like the love story stuff. Like, when it comes to the action stuff in here, it feels like it's shoehorned in for the sake of action. But the whole love story between Logan and this Japanese girl that he's sworn to protect is really, really good. And it's well done and it's well acted. And I believe it. But then out of nowhere, it's like, oh, by the way, this is a superhero movie. Remember, we got to shoehorn some superheroes and supervillains into this somewhere. So like Silver Samurai randomly shows up at the end. And then there's this other character who's like a lizard woman. Yeah, it's really dumb. But it does have a really cool after credit stinger where they set up X-Men Days of Future Past, which I was like, you have no idea how hype I was after that happened. The movie itself is okay. I still have not watched this one in 3D. I probably should. Never saw it in 3D. I saw it in 2D because I ended up seeing this like long after it was released. Like it was on the way out of the first run theaters before or by the time I saw it. But it was cool. I liked it. It wasn't great. Next up is the animated Wonder Woman movie. I remember when I watched this, I was like, you have no idea how much I want a live-action Wonder Woman movie after watching this. And I was so happy when we got the Gal Gadot Wonder Woman movie, and that lived up to all my expectations. So this is one of the first of the DC animated direct-to-video movies. First one I remember was it the Justice League? New Frontier was one of the first ones I remember. Well, actually, probably it was Batman and Mr. Freeze and Sub-Zero. And then I think that this is one of the early ones. This is like one of the first 5, I want to say. And I bought it sight unseen because I wanted to see it so bad, and it is actually really cool. What's her name? Kerry Russell from Felicity plays Wonder Woman in this. She's the voice, and she is fantastic. You can tell she's like, I'm freaking playing Wonder Woman. This is awesome. Nathan Fillion's in it. He plays, oh God, I can't remember her love interest's name. The one from the movie that Chris Pine played. I cannot remember his name right now. Steve Trevor. Almost said Rogers. Nathan Fillion plays him, which is great. And it also has the voices of Alfred Molina, Rosario Dawson, Marg Helgenberger, Oliver Platt, and Virginia Madsen. I think Virginia Madsen plays Hippolyta, her mother. And it's great. It's basically what we got in the movie, just done animated. It's kind of like the first script pass before we got the final version in the movie. But it's a lot of fun. I like it quite a bit. Next up is, I was talking about Denise Richards as a Bond girl earlier. That's World Is Not Enough. This is the third Pierce Brosnan Bond film, and I like this one quite a bit. I like it more than Tomorrow Never Dies, which was the one that came out before this, and definitely a lot more than the one that came out after this, which was Die Another Day. This one, although it is fun, it has a really cool twist on the Bond girl thing. I was not a fan of Denise Richards as Christmas Jones, the nuclear physicist, because she looks completely clueless. I could not in a million years believe that she was a nuclear physicist. Maybe if she did some research beforehand and stuff, so she didn't look so awkward speaking that kind of dialogue in the movie. But I talked about this when I first picked this up in one of my pickup streams a few months ago, that I guess everybody was mad that she was cast in this movie. Pierce Brosnan was mad. The director was mad because I guess she was forced upon the director because the Barbara Broccoli, who produces these movies and like is the money, basically said Denise Richards is like the hot new thing in Hollywood. We got to have her in this movie. And nobody wanted her to be in the movie. But like I said, she was forced to be in it. She was forced upon everybody. So I guess everybody, including Pierce Brosnan, basically ignored her when she was on set if they weren't shooting a scene. So and the director wouldn't give her direction or wouldn't give her at least clear direction about what she was supposed to be doing. So if you watch the background in certain scenes where people are talking and she's in the room with them, she's usually doing something really weird in the background, like picking at, like just looking at weird things, and shit. It's like nobody told her what to do. So this is her trying to figure out what she needs to do in the scene. And it's kind of funny. But like the whole Bond girl scenario where there's, two Bond girls in this one simultaneously for the Brosnan films. There's always two. So we have Sophie Marceau from Braveheart and Denise Richards. And Sophie Marceau is the one you think is going to be the lead Bond girl, but turns out she's the actual villain. The person you've been thinking is the villain, which was Robert Carlyle from Trainspotting. You've been thinking the whole movie he's the villain. He ends up being the sidekick, which I thought was pretty awesome. And there's a lot of great action in this. Fantastic opening action scene with that boat on the Thames. I like that one quite a bit. It's probably my second favorite. It's definitely my second favorite of the Brosnan era. So it's definitely GoldenEye over that one, but that one's fun too. This is the movie that we watched in the first episode of my podcast. The movie is starting. Me and Jeremiah. It was just me and him on that episode to set everything up that we were going to do later. And we watched The Wraith. This is a movie from the mid-'80s that was all about racing cars and revenge from beyond the grave kind of stuff. And it is still super fun. It's very dated, though. So this stars Charlie Sheen, Nick Cassavetes, who's a director now. He directed the frickin' Notebook. Sherilyn Fenn, this is the first thing that she ever did before she did Twin Peaks. And Randy Quaid plays the sheriff, and he's a very large man in this one. So like a group of like street racer punks do this whole thing where they run people off the road and then make them race for the pink slip for their car. And if you win, or if you're winning, they will cheat, or they'll just kill you and take your car anyway. And one of the, out of nowhere, this souped up race car shows up and keeps challenging all these people to races, and he kills the racer kills the people in the gang one by one by doing this. And Charlie Sheen is also this new guy in town who falls in love with Sherilyn Fenn, who's in a relationship with the lead guy in that gang, and all kinds of shenanigans ensue. So it's really kind of cool that like this, they don't really tell you what it is at the beginning, but it's like an alien looking race car is done by Dodge because there's Dodge symbols all over the fucking car. It's written in the back of it. Dodge works with aliens. It's the same way as like Mac is compatible with aliens in Independence Day. For a movie that was PG-13 and was being played all the time when I was a kid on cable at all times of the day, when Jeremiah and I watched this, I did not remember there being this much full frontal nudity in it. Like Sherilyn Fenn is like, laying on her back while she's suntanning and then rolls around. Hey guys, check out my goodies. And we were like, what is happening in this freaking movie? Like, where did this come from? I don't remember this. I think I would have remembered this. I don't know. But it's a lot of fun. And the thing is, when I bought this, I just ended up getting this from Amazon when I ordered it. And I really wanted the slipcover because this is from the Vestron Video Collector series. And I have all the other movies in the series that I wanted with the slipcase that has like all the information. They're usually like metallic and all that. And I wanted to have everything uniform. So ended up going on eBay, and I just found the slip for sale for like $3. So I did that. I have OCD. I can't help it. Next up is another 3D Blu-ray, which is another movie I need to watch. I did not see this in 3D in the theater. I saw the sequel in 3D in the theater, but not this one. And that's Wreck-It Ralph. And it has a lenticular cover with all the main characters. You got one of the ghosts from Pac-Man. You got Q*bert, Sonic. You got Zangief over here. You got Dr. Robotnik or Eggman. You got the Rhino from Altered Beast, which I think is still a weird choice. You got M. Bison here in the back. So, yeah, this movie is all about arcade game characters. Wreck-It Ralph is from this arcade game, and when the games aren't being used, I guess when the arcade games are all turned off at the end of the night, when the arcade closes, all the characters from all the arcade games get together in like this central hub area and mingle and interact and have fun and all this kind of stuff. And Wreck-It Ralph ends up teaming up with this young girl character who is from a racing game, but she's like one of the deleted characters that was hidden in the code. And who her big dream is to actually get to race in the game that she's never been able to race because no one would pick her if she did. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of really cool in-jokes when it comes to video games. It's a lot of fun. It's got a lot of heart. I saw this in the theater, like I said, and I really, really enjoyed it. I saw this with my ex, and a lot of the stuff that I wished was in Pixels is in this. Like I always said in Pixels, Q*bert's kind of like a sidekick character in that one. They should have gone the whole hog, and whenever he takes a step, whatever he steps on lights up or turns a different color, like in the game. Here they do that kind of stuff where whenever he talks, he like does that swearing thing that he does in the video game, which I think is really cool. I gotta sit up, my booty hurt. So now we have the first movie in this trilogy that just recently ended in theaters. That's X. So you had X, then Pearl, and now Maxine, which I just recently watched this past weekend. I ended up renting it on Amazon Prime. So each movie in this series is a different style of horror movie, which is why I like this series as much as I do. I might not think that some of the individual movies are great, but I like the fact that each time they make one in the series, it is a different style. So this one is a slasher. A bunch of 20-somethings get a camera and go and rent out a barn on this old woman's property to make a porno. And turns out that the woman they're renting that barn from sees them doing the porn things and makes her super horny. And because her husband is not able to, put out anymore because he's a very, very old man, and so is she. And now she has this. I guess when you see Pearl, you find out about her libido problems. It frustrates her so much that she goes on a killing spree and starts killing all the people involved with the porno. And you have Mia Goth here on the front, who ends up being like the final girl. And it is a lot of fun. The deaths are really kind of cool. The big fight at the end is really cool. Jenna Ortega, who is Wednesday on the Netflix show, that's her screaming on the back. The scene with her kind of ruins part of the movie for me because the whole movie she's been kind of like, yeah, I don't like pornos. I'm just doing this for the experience of getting some film work in and all that kind of stuff. And while she's watching a scene being filmed, because she's the sound girl, she's like, can I be in the movie now? And everyone looks at her like, what? She's like, yeah, I want to screw somebody and I want to be in the movie. And it's like, where did the hell did this come from? Like, this came out of nowhere. And it's just really awkward and off-putting. And I think it kind of ruined the middle of the movie for me. But it's a lot of fun. It's not great, but I really do enjoy it. And I think the funniest thing about it is it co-stars Scott Mescudi, who is Kid Cudi, the pop star, and he's packing. He is beyond endowed, and he has no problem letting you see it. And I was just kind of like, well, I can now say that I've seen Kid Cudi's cock. Okay, great. I'm actually getting rid of this because a 4K is coming out, so maybe I should not even talk about it. I'll talk about it when I get to 4K. I'll leave it out. Next up, we have these two movies. I had these in a box before, but the box got really damaged because it was really flimsy and cheap. And every time I would move the box around on my shelves and all that, it would get damaged even more because it was so cheap. So I just ended up throwing it out. But it's the two X-Files feature films. And I might watch this one tonight. So the first one is Fight the Future. This one came out between seasons, I think it was 5 and 6. It might have been 4 and 5. I think it was actually 5 and 6. It's the end of the previous season. So this came out during the summer between the two seasons. At the end of the previous season, the X-Files were shut down. Mulder and Scully were reassigned to different divisions, and somebody burned all the files in their office. So, and like, it's like got this whole like, oh my God, what are they going to do in this movie that's coming out in a couple of months? Which is why I wanted to go and see the movie so badly. So me and a bunch of friends went and saw it opening night, and it blew my freaking mind. Like, it made me so interested in the X-Files. Like, my fandom kind of went through the roof after that. Then I watched the first episode of the season that came out after this, and I was like, no, I'm good. And I stopped watching it. So that did not last very long. So like I said, this one there's no more X-Files. Mulder and Scully are reassigned. At the beginning of this, they're investigating a possible bomb in a office building, and it turns out to be like another conspiracy that they have to investigate. They kind of go rogue, find out that the whole big alien plot that has been happening on the TV show since the beginning is starting to like come to the end or come to another big phase. And it does answer a lot of questions, but it also sets up a lot of new ones, which they kind of retcon. That's that word I was thinking of before when it came to Witch Trap or whatever? It retcons some of that in the first episode of the next season. And I was like, no, I'm good. I don't need to watch this. But the movie itself is fantastic. I saw this in the theater, I want to say 4 times. I loved everything about it. Like I said, I went absolutely crazy for the X-Files that summer. I was all about it. I bought the action figures based on this from McFarlane Toys. I had every single one of them displayed in my room. You would not believe it. I had it everywhere. I had them everywhere. I bought the soundtrack. I bought a poster. I was like totally in. So when the new season started, you can tell how disappointed I was. The movie is great. I think it still holds up very well. I have not watched it in a long, long time, which is why I might watch it tonight. So the show ended after season 10 and went for 10 freaking seasons, 2 of them without David Duchovny. So it had been a while. I want to say the show ended in 2002, maybe 2003. And 2008, I want to say, is when this came out. So when it was announced, I was like, okay, so the show did end after 10 seasons, but they still had threads left in regards to the alien conspiracy storyline. And I was like, oh, cool. So they let the interest build back up for it, because 10 seasons and 2 pretty lackluster seasons, toward the end of season 9 and 10 are kind of, they let the interest rebuild itself, and then we drop this bombshell on everybody. And I'm thinking it's going to be the big reveal about what's really going on with this alien invasion plot and all that. And then I see the first trailer, and it has absolutely nothing to do with that. It has to do with a psychic who is able to tell you when somebody has been killed. And there's like a serial killer going around killing certain people, like women. And this guy can tell you when it's going to happen, but he can't tell you where or something like that. But I was like, I'm still going to go and see it because I like these characters. David Duchovny was back. Gillian Anderson was back. Pretty much everybody who was, a major character in the series was in there at some point. So I go and see it opening day. And it's ended up being the biggest piece of shit I've ever seen in my life. It is basically a Monster of the Week movie. They used to do, like, in order to get away from the serialized storytelling that they were doing with that alien invasion plot and all that, they would have like Monster of the Week episodes, and usually they were pretty cool. I did not want to see that for the movie, and a really bad one at that. So basically, Mulder and Scully are retired. Scully works at a hospital now. She's like a full-on doctor. Mulder just stays at home and strokes his really fake-looking beard that he's wearing. I remember when that was the big thing that they were hiding from everybody, was that Mulder had a beard. And then they had like a werewolf on set, like a guy in a werewolf suit on set that they used to throw the paparazzi off. That's how arrogant Chris Carter was about people's wanting to get the scoop on this movie. Was they had a fake werewolf parading around the set that people would take pictures of, so they would think there was a werewolf movie, and it had absolutely nothing to do with anything. There was no werewolf in this actual movie. Billy Connolly's in this. He plays this priest who is actually like a reformed child molester who has like psychic powers to like tell you when somebody's been killed, and he can kind of tell you where they were or what happened when they died. And turns out the people who are doing the killing, it's some dude that is kidnapping women to have body parts to turn his male lover into a female. It's like, what? You couldn't just cut his pee-pee off and have him do like the sex change like we have? the technology to do. You're going to go about this big roundabout way to do it. I was like, this is dumb. So yeah, I did not like this movie, and it has like one of the worst end credit sequences ever. Like, you just watch this really dark movie that's about murder and like, just push it in. Yeah, just tuck it back, bro. It deals with murder and, child molesters and all this kind of stuff. And then you have this weird poppy upbeat song playing over footage of the ocean. And then like the camera is like flying over the ocean. You can tell it's like a helicopter shot. And then you see Mulder and Scully in a rowboat in the middle of the ocean. They just kind of like wave at the camera. I'm like, what the hell is happening here? Like, what is this? I don't know, and I don't like it. It is so bad. So, absolutely hated it. And I was really kind of looking forward to it, too. And then there was people that I knew who were like iffy on the prospect when they saw the trailer. And I was like, I'm still going to go and see it. And then I would see them later, and I'm like, you were right. I probably should have skipped it. But the fact that I was super excited about it really pissed me off when it was over. Next up we have, I think this is pretty rad. It is the X-Men Days of Future Past, the Rogue Cut. So, if you saw Days of Future Past, you will notice that in the end credits, it's naming off the cast members, and it says starring Hugh Jackman, Jesus Christ, what's his name? Sorry, Hugh Jackman, James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, and then out of nowhere it says, what's her name? God damn it. Anna Paquin. She gets like 5th or 6th billing. You saw her for a grand total of 4 seconds in the movie. At the very end, when they do like the whole, things have changed in the future now thing, and you see Anna Paquin walking around the X-Men mansion, or the Xavier mansion. And she gets like 5th or 6th billing for that? I'm like, what the hell is going on? Did they like cut a bunch of scenes with her in it? Yeah, they did. They cut out an entire subplot that involved Rogue. So they decided to make a like extended cut of this to put all those scenes back in. And what happens is when Wolverine in the past, so he's being held in the past by Kitty Pryde's powers, and he sees the young version of Stryker, the person who basically tortured him and injected him with all the adamantium. He sees the past version of Stryker, and he freaks out. And in the future, he starts to wake up a little bit from the trance he's in that's putting him in the past, and he brings his claws out and he starts thrashing around, and he cuts Kitty Pryde wide open by accident. In the theatrical film, it still happens, but they're just kind of like, we'll patch her up and all that, and it'll be okay, and she's still involved in the rest of the movie. Well, in this version of the movie, it is pretty serious. Like, she is bleeding to death, and she is going to bleed to death, and she's not going to be able to hold Wolverine in the past for much longer. So everyone that's with her in that, where they're holding up in that church, so it's Xavier, it's Magneto, it's Iceman, and I think Storm. They all have like a little powwow, and they're like, what can we do to fix this problem? Because we have no medical supplies. We have no people here with medical experience. Like, what can we do to help her? And we can't do it while she's holding Logan in the past. So they're like, well, we can get someone who can steal her powers and take over for her while we give her the medical attention she needs. So they're like, okay, cool, we'll go find Rogue. Where is Rogue? Rogue's supposed to be dead. And Iceman's like, no, they're actually, like, she's being held by the people who are hunting them down in the one place that even Professor Xavier can't find her, and that's back in the Cerebro chamber at the Xavier mansion. So they plan a rescue mission to go and get her. And they do. They go back to the mansion, they sneak in, they find her being experimented on in the Cerebro chamber, and they break her out, and they're escaping with her, and Iceman dies in the process of this. Her ex-boyfriend. And they bring her back to the church where they're hiding. She basically like walks up to Kitty Pryde, and they kind of had issues in The Last Stand because they were both fighting over Iceman, to date him. And they basically give each other a look, and they're just kind of like, this is bigger than our problems with each other. And you see the look, and I was like, that's cool. So she touches Kitty's face, sucks just enough of her powers away so it doesn't hurt her. She takes over for Kitty so Kitty can get treated. And in the finale of the movie now, when the Sentinels break in and start killing everybody, you see Rogue full on sitting there still holding Logan into the past when it's happening. If you watch the theatrical cut, they basically blacked out that side of the screen so they covered her up. It makes the movie better, I think. It makes the stakes higher. You know, like there's a part where they can actually possibly not finish this plan that they have worked out because Kitty could die before, you know, Logan finishes what he needs to do in the past and all this kind of cool stuff. I think it makes the movie a hell of a lot better, and I wish they left it in. So when they released this on Blu-ray, I definitely had to pick it up. I watched it the moment I brought it home. I was like, yes, the movie is great no matter what. I still like the theatrical version a lot. It's great. I've probably seen that more than I've seen this. But this definitely gives new meaning to things from the movie and gives it a whole new angle, and I love it. It is fantastic. I wish we would get a 4K upscale of that. But, you know, when you're trying to get all the X-Men films in your collection, sometimes you got to have some dog shit in there. You need a copy of that roll cut. I highly recommend picking it up. It is super cool. You know, you got to have some dog shit in there with the good stuff, and I'm talking about X-Men Origins Wolverine. I freaking hate this movie so much. I was super excited for it. I loved who they cast as Sabretooth, you know, Liev Schreiber. I thought that was awesome. They had Ryan Reynolds in here playing Deadpool, although Will.i.am is playing somebody in it too, and I was just like, what the hell? Kevin Durand is playing Blob before he's the Blob that we know. And it was like, I was like, I am so there. But I talked about it maybe the last stream, either the last stream or the one before that there was this person I worked with at my old job who was constantly buying bootleg movies from someone she knew. And she ended up getting an advance copy of this. And she watched it, and she was like, yeah, it's really, really good. You should watch it. And I was like, can I borrow it? And she's like, yeah, sure. So she loans it to me, and I watch it. And it's a really early cut of the movie. Some of the special effects weren't done. It had temp music. All the music in the version of this that I saw was from the Transformers movies, the first Michael Bay Transformers movie. And being a huge fan of that score, I'm sitting there going like, wow, this is weird. Here, seeing these characters with this music. Okay, whatever. The opening was a little bit different when you see Logan and Sabretooth like fighting through all the different wars in history because they're so old. So it was cut a little bit differently. And the final fight with Weapon 11, I think is what they called him. A lot of it was wireframe and like half rendered characters. Like it looked like Deadpool, but it was like, it had no color to it. It was like this white, like, you know, no shading to it or anything. It was just this white human figure that was doing all the moves, but it didn't look anything like the character and all that. So they ruined Deadpool in this by sewing his freaking mouth shut and then turning him into a Logan-ish character who has big long sword blades that come out from one nut from between his knuckles. So he has like swords for arms. The CGI in this is terrible. The action, I think, is terrible. I don't like the way the story goes. The de-aging of Patrick Stewart at the end of the movie, I think, looks beyond awful. Especially like the version of Emma Frost that they use in the movie is just like, I was like, oh, what effect is that? But there's one effect in here that I thought was unfinished because I saw an early copy or an early version of the movie. So when Wolverine is on the run at the beginning of the movie, he like holds up in this old man's cottage and he's in the bathroom and he like brings his claws out. And the claws did not look like they turned him into Baraka, basically. Yeah. So he brings his claws out while he's looking in the mirror, and it does not look like the claws are attached to his hands at all. They look like they're floating over his hands. And there's like no shading to the blades. They look like cartoons. It almost looked like PlayStation 2 graphics. And I was like, that just has to be like an early version of this scene. So I'm not going to judge it from that. So when I finally saw the finished version of the movie, I did not go to see it in the theater because I did not like it when I saw that early cut. But I did eventually see it on home video. And when I watched it on home video, I was like, okay, let's see what this version, you know, that scene looks like. And it's the exact same effects. That was the final shot. These horrible looking CGI claws that don't even look like they're attached to his body is still in the damn movie. And they thought that looked good. I'm like, the hell with this. This is bullshit. So I have not watched this since that time I watched it when it first came out on home video. and I bought this used because I did not want to buy it new. I was not going to give it that much money or put that much money toward it. I got it for like $4 at Half Price Books, and I was like, that's the most amount of money they're going to get at me when it comes to this movie. And I'm probably never going to watch it again. Anyway, next up we have the 35th anniversary edition of Your Hunter from the Future. So I know I told the story of this before. This is funny. So we when I'm a little kid, this came out in I think 1983. I want to say 1983. So my parents took me and my little brother to see some movie in the theater. I do not remember what movie that was. All I know is on the way out, we see this poster. And I'm looking at it, and I think my dad might have gone to the bathroom and we're waiting outside for him to get out so we can leave. And I see this poster on the wall for like an upcoming movie. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh my God, is that a caveman fighting aliens? Like, are those alien ships? Like, is this a movie about caveman versus aliens? And I look at my mom and I go, we're going to see that movie. And she's like, what? I'm like, we're going to see that movie. She's like, it looks like shit. I'm like, I don't care. We're going to see that movie. I'm like, I will have a freaking temper tantrum until we see that movie. And my dad comes out of the bathroom and he's just like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, we're going to go see this movie when it comes out. He's like, no, we're not. And I'm like, yes, we are. He's like, oh, we'll see. Well, guess what? The weekend that it was released, me and my brother ran into my parents' bedroom while they were still sleeping. It was probably 6 a.m. Start jumping up and down in the bed. We're going to see Your. We're going to see Your because we got reminded that it just come out because the Saturday morning cartoons we were watching were showing trailers for it. So I'm like, we're going to see the movie. My parents are like, I guess we're going to go see that movie. We get these kids to shut the hell up. So we go to see it. And I'm expecting aliens versus cavemen. That's not what I got. This turns out to be a really bad Italian like caveman Conan ripoff where turns out that it's not really prehistoric era when this stuff's happening. It's actually the future and the world's kind of gone to poop. And there's like future people that they need to deal with, and there's a spaceship involved, and there's dinosaurs still kind of, but they're made out of paper mache. It's really bad, like really bad, but it's awesome. It's so bad, it's awesome. I might actually show this to Church and Cardboard Zero when they come to visit next weekend. So, needless to say, I'm a little kid. Even this shows like these people with like laser guns and stuff. That's like the last 3 minutes of the movie. So we go to see it, and none of the things that I was expecting are in it, so I'm naturally upset. My brother's upset. My dad is mad because not only did my parents absolutely hate the movie, but they spent full price. At that time, I want to say tickets were probably like $3 or $4. Full price they paid for all four of us to go and see this thing. And my dad's like, well, next time you want to go see a movie? No. Think again. But it was on cable all the time when I was a kid. And I would usually watch it every time it was on. And I kind of grew to appreciate it. I'm like, it's a piece of shit, but it's at least fun. You know, it knows what it is. It's not trying to be anything other than a cheesy, like Conan ripoff with some Star Wars stuff thrown in to get people's butts in the seats. You know, but it's entertaining. And we watched this for my podcast. The movie is starting, and I introduced it to somebody who had never seen it before, and they were kind of like, it is a piece of shit, but it's an entertaining piece of shit. So good on you, Chris. So I'm keeping your alive. I don't know when I'll watch this again, but here's another Bond movie. It's a 1980s Gentleman Broncos. Yes, it is. Surveillance does. I hate those. Here's one of the first time that Sean Connery quit playing Bond. And that is You Only Live Twice. So this is the fifth Bond movie. This is the one where Roger Moore. Sean Connery was trying to renegotiate his contract to get more money, and they said no. So he was basically contractually obligated to make this movie without getting any extra money because each of these movies had made more and more money in the box office as they went along. So he's like, Thunderball made an absolute killing at the box office. And, even though Goldfinger was like a blockbuster, Thunderball made even more money than that. So he's like, hey, I think I have something to do with that. I want to raise. They're like, no, you're good. So he was contractually obligated to make this, and that basically pissed him off. So the whole movie, he looks like he does not give a shit. He's just kind of like, I guess I'm in this movie now. Yay. So it's not engaging, due to him. The story is stupid. It's kind of racist, but pretty much everything that you know from the Austin Powers movies making fun of the Bond films mostly came from this. Blofeld is the version of Blofeld in this is what they copied with Dr. Evil. Dr. Evil looks like the Blofeld in this with the scar on its face and the gray outfit and the shoes and everything. That's where it came from. The volcano secret lair came from this. All of that. I watched this once when I was a kid, and I absolutely hated it. My mom even said, "You're going to be disappointed." My mom loves the Sean Connery Bond films. Like she saw every one of them in the theater when she was younger. And she was like, "You're going to be disappointed," just like I was, because I'd been watching them all. And I was like, "I don't know, man. It can't get any worse than On Her Majesty's Secret Service," because I hated that one back then. I love it now, but I watched it, and I was like, "Yeah, you're right. That was pretty craptastic." So I bought this to have all of them in my collection, but I don't have any plans to rewatch it because I remember not liking it quite a bit. Although I probably should rewatch it because I didn't like On Her Majesty's Secret Service back when I was a kid, and I love it now. So maybe my opinion might change, but it is one of the lesser Bond films when you look at the reviews. Next up is Young Frankenstein, one of my favorite Mel Brooks joints. Saw this way back when. Another example as to how good this movie is I had never seen any of the movies that this was making fun of, and yet I still found it hysterically funny. So never saw the original Frankenstein from the 30s, never saw Bride of Frankenstein back then. So watching this, you would think that I'd be like, "What's happening?" But I was still laughing my ass off because Madeline Kahn and Gene Wilder are freaking great comedians. Like, they know what they're doing. And it was just so funny, regardless if I got the jokes or not, or what they were referencing. The jokes themselves were just funny. So absolutely love it. This is, like I said, one of my favorites. I want to say, I would say this is, like, Spaceballs is maybe just slightly beneath this. And then beneath that is Blazing Saddles. So I would say this is probably my favorite Mel Brooks movie. Absolutely fantastic parody of like the old Universal horror movies, specifically the Frankenstein stuff. Absolutely love it. Here is one that I did not even know existed, and this came after Target had announced that they were going to stop selling physical media, films on physical media. And I was kind of like, well, maybe I should go and check out, when I was grocery shopping at the Target, I was like, maybe I should go and check out the movie section in the electronics area to see if they have some sales and they're just trying to get rid of all the inventory they still have left in the store. And they were still getting new inventory. And I follow a lot of profiles on like Facebook and Twitter in regards to like new movie releases on home video. So I know what's coming up. And this one completely slipped me by. So when I saw it sitting there, and on top of that, it's a Steelbook edition, I was like, where the hell did that come from? And I definitely need to have it like right now. My throat is going so dry. And that is Young Sherlock Holmes. So I remember watching this all the time on cable when I was a kid. It's directed by Barry Levinson, who ended up doing Sleepers and Sphere. Diner, I think, was his first big movie. And Spielberg produced this, but the thing that this movie is the most well-known for, other than the fact that it's actually like a pretty fun Sherlock Holmes whodunit, it basically is like the origin of like the things that Sherlock Holmes does, like where the pipe came from in the hat, and his relationship with Watson and where Moriarty came from and what Moriarty is in relation to him is really kind of interesting and cool. The thing that this movie is the most well-known for is it was the first time somebody actually tried to use CGI to make something lifelike, like realistic, and not something like The Last Starfighter or Tron, where it's supposed to look kind of cartoony. So it's the first time anyone tried to make anything to be like, make it look as real as possible. And what that is someone's going around town and shooting darts at people, and the darts are tipped with a hallucinogenic that makes people see things that aren't there, and they end up usually doing something while they're freaking out about what they're seeing that ends up killing them. It's usually by accident, like somebody runs out in front of a carriage because they're running away from something that's chasing them, kind of thing. So this priest is walking down the aisle of his chapel, and he gets shot with the dart, and he turns around and looks at the stained glass window that's above the pit where the parapet, and there's a like a knight from the Crusades in the like his pictures in the stained glass window. Well, it jumps out of the window and actually starts like threatening him with a sword as it like walks down the aisle after the priest, and it looks still to this day fantastic. It does not look like some weird, like I said, like a Last Starfighter style CGI creation. It looks really good, and it sounds like ILM put as much research as they possibly could into making sure it would work. And I guess it was like the thing that took the longest throughout the entire process of making this movie. It's the part that took the longest to do. And it looks great. It looks fantastic, like I said. Really fun movie. I still had a lot of fun watching this one. The cast is pretty good. It's a bunch of people I never knew who the hell they were. I don't recognize any people in this, and I don't recall ever seeing them ever again after this. Maybe the love interest for Sherlock Holmes. I want to say it's Jenny Seagrave. I think she was in The Guardian. I could be wrong. But outside of that, I never saw the guy who played Moriarty, Holmes, or Watson again. But I absolutely love it. I used to watch it all the time on cable. Saw an advanced screening of this because of, was it C2E2? My ex and I got tickets to go and see a sneak preview of this. I think it was a month before it came out. Yeah, we had to fill out like a questionnaire when it was over to see what they liked or what we liked and what we didn't like about the movie, so they can change some things if they needed to. But I do remember reading about this in a bunch of online articles about like it playing at film festivals, like horror film festivals, and everyone saying that it was fantastic. This is by Adam Wingard, the guy who directed the last two Godzilla movies. He did Godzilla vs. Kong and Godzilla Cross Kong. And he did a couple of other movies with Dan Stevens, who was in the last Godzilla movie. Was it The Guest? And something else. He did a couple of things for one of those VHS movies that came out in the ABCs of Death. But it's called You're Next. It's a home invasion movie. So a big family. We're talking like, mother, father, like the matriarch, the patriarch. And they have like 4 kids. And their significant others come to this big house that the parents live in to get together for like a big dinner kind of thing. And one of the sons brings his new girlfriend who's Australian. And like the first chunk of the movie is like everyone sitting at dinner asking her all these questions about like, hey, where would you grow up? What are your hobbies? What are you into? How'd you guys meet? And then like an arrow flies through one of the windows and hits somebody in the eye. And there's like these 3 guys in these masks, these animal masks. There's one that's a wolf. There's one that's a deer, and one that's a tiger, I think. And it's like a cat and mouse game in the house of like, trying to hide from the people, trying to fight back kind of thing. And turns out that this new girl that the one son brought along with him, the Australian girl, has a background in survivalism. She lived in the wilderness by herself for a while, as just a test to see if she could do that kind of thing. So she becomes the most awesome final girl in a horror movie ever. She is so freaking rad. Her name is Shari Vinson. And I saw her in maybe 2 other movies after this. One of them is Bait, the 3D shark movie. She's fantastic in this. And it actually stars Ty West, the guy who directed X and Pearl and Maxine. He's the guy who gets shot with the arrow in the eye at dinner. And it's really kind of a fun. It's not really scary. I wouldn't really say it's gory because it's mostly gunshots and like arrows and stuff like that. One guy gets a blender smashed over his head while it's running, and it kind of chops up the top of his head. It's really kind of fun. It's clever. And like I said, the final girl is fantastic. Like you end up rooting for her the whole movie. And when we saw the sneak preview, people were cheering in the theater, and that had not happened in so long. So I was like, oh, I don't think you need to change anything. This movie is definitely what I would consider to be like a crowd pleaser type of thing because of the reaction. And me and my ex like loved it. And she was even saying like, I might want to dress up as her as cosplay or something like that in the future because she's fucking awesome. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely. Here's a Kevin Smith movie that ended up having its name changed when it came to home video, and that's Zack and Miri Make a Porno. When I bought this originally on, I bought it at Best Buy on Blu-ray. It was called just Zack and Miri. They did not want Make a Porno on the title because they figured if people saw it on the shelf, they would think it actually was a porno and wouldn't buy it. So they just called it Zack and Miri. But then I ended up getting this Canadian version that I found at Half Price Books instead. and it has the full title on it. So it's got your typical Kevin Smith humor. It's dick jokes, poop jokes, sex jokes, all that kind of thing. Really immature. So these two best friends, which are Seth Rogen and Elizabeth Banks, they're running out of money, and they have the bright idea to get some friends together and make like a really low-budget Star Wars porno ripoff and try to get some money so they can actually like live. And they end up like they've never been an item together. They just are best friends. They end up like falling in love as they do it, and end up getting like this weird family unit together with all the people they hire to be in the porno. One of them is Tracy Lords, who used to be an actual porn star. Jason Mewes is in it. Jay from the Jay and Silent Bob stuff. He's playing a totally different character though. Justin Long is in it. Who else? Craig Robinson. He has some of the best lines in it. You can see him right there. Jason Mewes' character is like an actor who's trying to become a porn star instead of the other way around. And like the thing is, whenever he's about to have sex in the movie with one of the castmates, he looks at the camera and goes, "Let us fuck." And it is so funny. I really enjoyed this one. I ended up seeing it with a bunch of friends in the theater, and it did not last very long in the theater. I think probably because it had porno in the title. But it's actually like, your typical Kevin Smith movie actually is crass and crude and all that, and has a lot of questionable shit going on in it, like donkey shows and Clerks too. But it actually has a lot of heart, which is why I liked it so much. I'm like, it's actually like a love story between those two characters. Like, you actually see them grow from being best friends to being like, being interested in each other, and it's really good. This is coming out on 4K, and I just pre-ordered it, so I'm not going to show that. So the last movie is one that I think Peter, using Justin Schlong, haha, you're funny. I think, Peter, you were the one that didn't last long. Me too, Zach and Mary. It didn't last long. I want to say, Peter, you were the one that asked me where this movie was in my collection during my previous series of streams that I did in 2000, and that's Zoolander. And to the fact where friends of mine actually bought me a copy of this for my birthday because they watched the stream and saw me saying, "Oh, I thought I did have that. I guess I don't." So for my birthday, they bought me a copy. So this is because of you, Peter. Ben Stiller playing this airhead fashion model. And it's like all the adventures that he gets into. And what's his name? Oh, God, I can't remember that dude's name. Wow. Owen Wilson is like his competition, but they become best friends at the end. But like I still want to say the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life is the breakdance fight at the end of this. It is super funny. Like everyone, let's fight. And then people are spinning on their heads and kicking each other in the face. The other thing is the gasoline fight at the beginning. Like, oh, let's go and get some smoothies, and the way they're sucking on the smoothies on the front. Just everything about it cracks me up. It is. I don't think it's nearly as funny as I found it back when I first saw it, because some of it I don't think aged very well, but it's still very funny, and it's definitely better than the second one. But why male models? Show me the blue steel. It looks exactly like the others, but oh, it's beautiful. Aside from the two movies that I'm going to abstain from showing off because I'm going to get rid of them because 4K versions are coming out. That's it for my Blu-ray collection. That is it. So, like I said, next week I'll start up talking about my 4K collection. I feel like I'm taking my crazy pills. I need to watch again. I have not seen it in a long time. I didn't even watch this. I just opened it because the wrapper was damaged. You can see that it's kind of bent here. Like, I guess when it was being transported, it kind of got somebody sat on it or put something on top of it that kind of bent it. But anyway, next week I'm going to start talking about my 4K collection. We'll start off with the TV on TV on 4K, and then start off by talking about the box sets and multi-movie packs that I have in 4K, and that's going to be rad. I have a lot of cool, interesting stuff in 4K. Stuff that I never thought in a million years would ever be released on 4K, as well. So it's going to be cool. So come back for that on next Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Central. If you're trying to watch Zoolander. Actually, no, I'm going to watch X-Files. Maybe I'll watch Zoolander after if I'm still awake. And then I never got a chance to release my newest episode of Tides of Flame, my Dungeons & Dragons campaign that I stream on Twitch. I was going to release it on Sunday, but something came up and I couldn't do it. So I'm going to actually release it this Sunday now that I know that I have no plans. So that's going to be a thing. So keep an eye out for that on my channel. It's going to be released maybe around noon on Sunday-ish. So keep an eye out for that. A lot of cool stuff happens and sets stuff up for the next episode we're going to have, which is going to be epic. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Peter, and everybody else that came and hung out with me tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm a little tired, so I've been like slurring my words and forgetting things that I need to be talking about and people's names and shit. So whatevs. I will see you all next time. Have a good night, everybody. Stay safe out there. Chris from Midlife Crisis Media out.
You know how long I've been waiting for this? Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself, yeah.